Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Culinary Barn. Today I am doing a little something sweet for Rosh Hashanah, which starts tomorrow, the 22nd. And for those of you who may not know, my mother, one of her best friends growing up, was Jewish, Margot, and I loved being in her kitchen. I loved eating all of her food. She and my mother did a lot of volunteer work together and fundraising campaigns together. So I would often participate, the little do-gooder that I was as a child. But I think one of the main reasons I loved doing all this charity work because it typically meant finishing off a day of work at Margot's house and eating all of her incredible food. And she also had an incredibly handsome son who I had the biggest crush on. He was like 10 years older than me though, but I digress. Anyways, I loved being at her house. I loved being in her kitchen and at her table, particularly close to the high holidays. And she would just make the best of the best. So today and tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a few recipes. I'm going to make Margot's honey apple cake today for you. Very simple recipe that is just, in my mind, just full of love and warmth and people around the table. And I'm also going to be prepping a challah to take to a Rosh Hashanah dinner tomorrow night, a local community supper here tomorrow night for Rosh Hashanah. So I'll be bringing cake as well as a beautiful circular challah, which I'm going to start today and finish tomorrow morning. And I will show you some video of that. Speaking of challah, that is what I'm having for breakfast this morning. The lovely Judy brought this for me yesterday as a gift. And so I just have a big old wad of it right here. And because so much of Rosh Hashanah has to do with sweet things and sweetness, I'm going to do a little bit of honey. I have a little bit of butter on here as well, and just a little bit of honey on this beautiful, beautiful piece of challah. So thank you, Judy. Such a sweet gift to receive from you. Bread, butter, and honey. It's fantastic. Eating aside, I can't help myself. On with this very simple to make cake. It really is the taste of autumn. We've got apples, we've got cinnamon and a little bit of allspice and touch of vanilla. Everything comes together in one bowl and goes into a beautiful, ideally circular pan. Bakes off, your whole house smells delicious, and then you have a beautiful cake to share with friends and family, all in the spirit of coming together in warmth and sweetness for the new year coming. So let's get on with the recipe because it is very quick. So I'm going to do this, like I said, all in one bowl. All I've done ahead of time is grate my apples. Now this is the way that Margot always did her honey apple cake based on my memory of it. It's not always done with shredded apples, but I like doing shredded apples. I think the cake ends up being much more moist and then, in my opinion, far more delicious. So that is the only thing I've done ahead of time. And I just happened to do this in my Cuisinart. I just used the shredding blade, but you'd of course do this on a box grater as well. We'll just take a touch more time. So into this bowl, I have just some neutral oil. You can use grapeseed oil or canola oil. I of course will put this full recipe, full written recipe up on the website at enidgrace.com under the recipes tab. So I've got some vanilla in here, and then on to the sweet things. Of course, there is honey, and this is local honey from up where I grew up in Rednersville. And look at that glorious amber. Just going to use my spatula and get all of this out and add this in to our oil. And then if that wasn't sweet enough, I am going to go in with a little bit of brown sugar. I prefer dark brown sugar, but you can use light if you want. And not too much, but a bit of white sugar as well. And this, of course, will add sweetness, but it does add some nice texture to this cake as well. I'm just going to give that a quick little mix here just with my spatula. And at this stage, I'm also going to add in a little bit of salt, just to balance, particularly all of that sweetness. And I'm going to go in with 3 large eggs. Uno, dos, e tre. And I'm going to switch to a whisk. Of course, you can do this in a stand mixer if you want, but when I learned how to make this, I had to do it in a bowl with a whisk, no special equipment. So I'm just going to whisk these gorgeous farm-raised eggs in. They've got such a beautiful colored yolk, like calendula colored yolk. So get this all mixed together till it's well combined, like so. That. Put my whisk aside for the moment, and then I'm going to go in with my shredded apples. Depending on the size of apples, you might need 4 or 5. And my preference is to use a nice seasonal crisp apple, not too sweet, but also not too tart. In this case, I've used local Cortlands, but Crispin is a nice one. Mutsu's would be a really great apple. Ideally, and for those of you who are going to ask, because I get this question a lot when dealing with apples, my least 2 favorite apples for baking are Macintosh and, perhaps controversial, I don't necessarily really care for a Granny Smith apple in baking. I prefer other varieties such as Cortlands and Crispins. Northern Spy would be amazing as well. So I've got the apples in here. I'm just going to give this a fold with my little whisk here. And then on to the dry ingredients. So in a separate bowl, I've got just regular all-purpose flour, and then we're going to flavor this and leaven this. So for our leaveners, we've got baking powder and baking soda. I'm going to go in with just a couple spoonfuls of the baking powder and 1 of the baking soda. And then for our flavoring, I've got cinnamon, and you can do as much or as little of these seasonings as you like. It's really to your taste. I'm going to go in with 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, and I really love allspice, so that's my preference. This is just about 1/2 teaspoon of allspice, but you could certainly do nutmeg. You could do a little pinch of clove as well, if that's your preference. And I forgot, for our wet ingredients, I'm also going to add in a little bit of vanilla. This is vanilla bean paste that I make, but you can of course just use regular vanilla bean paste from the store or vanilla extract, or you don't have to put it in at all, completely optional. So I'm just going to grab a whisk again and just incorporate my leavener in to the flour along with the spices. So, and then bring our 2 bowls together. I'll just quickly mix in this vanilla bean. And then I'll tip in my flour mixture. I have the oven preheated to 350 degrees. And I'm going with a slightly decorative bundt pan. When Margot made this, she of course always made it circular, but sometimes she would use a tube pan. Other times she would use a bundt pan, and occasionally she would make little individual ones in a muffin tin. But I prefer to use either the tube or the bundt pan because I like to put a little pot of honey in the center hole here when the cake is served. Ideally, a little honey pot like so with the little honey wand. And then if people want to add a little bit of extra honey to the top of their cake, they can just pull the honey wand out of the center and drizzle on top. So I have this well sprayed with a canola spray, and you want to really get into all of those little crevices to ensure that this comes out with ease. So back to our batter, I'm just going to gently fold this in. I don't want to overmix this, so I don't want this to be a particularly tense cake. All right, we are almost there. It smells delicious. I'm just going to make sure that all of the flour is incorporated. Make sure you go right to the bottom of the bowl so you don't end up with a surprise little puff of flour when you go to scrape this into the tin. All right, so there is our gorgeous apple batter, and there is so much apple in there. which you will not regret. All right, I've got my tin ready, and I'm just going to tip our batter in as evenly as you can around the bundt, making sure to get every last bit. Oh my gosh, it just smells so good. I'm very much an autumn girl, so all of these smells just really hit for me. And it's a gorgeous, sunny, really autumn-looking day outside. All of the maple trees above the barn have turned color, and they're dropping their leaves like crazy just in the last day or two. So it's feeling very autumnal outside. All right, so I'm just going to smooth the top of this, and that is ready for the oven. So as you can see, I had my mise en place ready, so of course I shaved off a little bit of time, but to bring this whole cake together is mere moments, about 15 minutes probably total prep. It is going to take some time in the oven, so I'm going to give myself a nice little break. Of course, I have a book recommendation for you. So again, 350 degree preheated oven. This is going to go in, and I'll be back to chat books. All right, our honey apple cake is in the oven, and that is going to take probably a good 45 to 50 minutes. So I have some downtime. And with that downtime, I am going to enjoy a nice cup of tea. I've got some more of this gorgeous challah that Judy dropped out for me, my little pot of honey to enjoy with it. And of course, that means a book. And because we are going into Rosh Hashanah, and I am paying tribute to Margot today and tomorrow with the recipes that I'm making, I do have quite a love for, of course, Italian food. For those of you who know me or have been following me for some time, that is certainly more of my culinary forte. But because my mother's two best friends growing up were Italian and Jewish, I spent a lot of time around their tables, and of course my own large Nan's family table. So I have a lot of accesses that come together in terms of where my culinary inspiration and experience comes from. But many times, having lived and traveled to Italy, I did have an interest in the Jewish Italian cuisine. If you've ever been to the Jewish Ghetto in Rome, or there's quite a few small villages throughout Tuscany and certainly into northern Italy that has a lot of great Jewish Italian food. So this book that I'm going to flip through, I've had for a while, but it's not an old one. I do have a rather robust collection of Jewish cookbooks, but this one is The Jewish Flavors of Italy by Silvia Nacimuli. And I really do love this book. It's a bit modernized, but the classic recipes are certainly in here. And I'll flip through to a few in another part of this video. But I just, of course, love the photos in this. And there's some great inspirations in here. And also, like, touches on a little bit of history if you're unfamiliar with how these two cultures of food came together during the Second World War and prior to that, really. And one of my favorite villages in Italy is called Petigliano, and it's in the Toscana region in Tuscany. And I had the opportunity to meet a lovely woman there. She was 91 at the time that I met her. And she was a refugee during the Second World War. She came to live in Italy. She was actually hidden in Petigliano. And I got to spend this amazing afternoon with her. And I didn't have time to actually be in her kitchen and watch her cook, even though she was still actively cooking at 91. But she talked me through a few recipes, showed me some of her books and some of her handwritten notes. And I have since made several of her recipes in my own home kitchen. So I often think of her fondly. Sadly, we lost her about 1.5 years ago, but she was such a great inspiration to me. And when I look at some of these recipes in this book, I do have a couple other Jewish Italian cookbooks as well, but it always makes me think of her and reminds me why I cook, why I love cooking for other people, and really what food does, which is bring people together around hopefully a common ideal of kindness and thoughtfulness and just being at the table together with one another. And that I remember as a child being a big part of Rosh Hashanah at Margot's table. Of course, it was about the food. I never left there hungry. I don't think I ever left my Nan's table or an Italian or a Jewish table ever hungry. And I try to do that to my own guests here, making sure that they never leave hungry, but also that they never leave without a feeling of kindness and peace and love that came from just sitting around the table. So I give an immense amount of tribute to Mariana, who was the woman who I met in Pitigliano, and then of course to Margot, who was my mother's friend and who taught me so much about the Jewish table growing up. So this is the book I'm going to flip through. I've got a cup of tea, I've got my challah, cake is in the oven, and we'll be back for the reveal of the cake. I've come outside to have my tea and challah and look at my cookbook, and I mentioned it's feeling very autumnal out here. I mean, it's the most gorgeous day. Obviously still warm enough that I can not have to worry about sleeves, but there are so many leaves on the ground and I just love it so much. Look at the trees changing color, and there's just so many leaves on the ground. I love it. I love the sound they make when you step on them. Okay, so into this book here. Of course, the photography is beautiful, but what I love, of course, is the author goes into the story of her parents. I always love sort of the prologue to a book where they really give you some background on themselves and their history and what this book is about. And I just love the introduction of her family. So there's several pages talking about her Jewish Italian family. But as far as recipes go, I'm going to do a thorough flip through, but there's always a couple that I go back to. One of them being the negozi modi, and these are a polpetto, or a meatball essentially, with lots of celery, which I love. Such an underrated central ingredient. People just always think of it more as an aromatic, but it is such a great ingredient on its own. So I make these quite often, and I really love them. And then probably one of the most famous Jewish Italian dishes would be the carciofi alla Judea, which you'll find in many places, but particularly in Rome. These are very, very popular, and they're not particularly difficult to make at home, but if you happen to find yourself in Rome or in a family kitchen where these are on offer, they do not disappoint. I mean, look at how gorgeous they look. They're soft and buttery in the center, and then you get these like salty, crispy edges. They're so good. But one other recipe that I wanted to point out of particular interest is the conchia di zucchine. I often made this recipe, but with melanzana, with eggplant, when I owned Piccolina, my Italian cafe and bar, and they were hugely successful. So this recipe isn't the one I actually use. The one that I learned was from actually in Pitigliano, but this is a version of it, just done with zucchini, and it's such a great recipe for an antipasti or for a sandwich filling. And we used to put this on a lot of our panino in the shop, but we also sold it by the jar. And it's just such a simple recipe. I'd make a version of this one as well called zucchini sott'olio, but they're all a very similar recipe. So this is a good one to look at as well. And speaking of challah, this isn't the particular recipe that I use, but this is very similar to the one that I'm going to be starting today and finishing tomorrow morning. I like to do mine as a full braid, a full circular braid, using some braids that have sesame and some seeds that don't, or in some braids that don't. And then I like to put the pot of honey in the center. This is the way that I saw Margot make hers, but this is also the way I've seen it done in Italy many times. So this is the version that I do. So I'll show you my finished version of my Rosh Hashanah challah tomorrow. Okay, I have inverted our honey apple cake onto a little pedestal here and just lift off. No sticking. That's why it's important to go really heavy on the greasing, and it's just the perfect color. It is gloriously burnished brown, and the smell is just so incredibly wonderful. So all I like to do here, some people will do like a drizzle of icing. It's not really my preference. So I just like to do a little dusting of confectioner's sugar on top. Keep it very simple, yet still elegant. And then, like I said, you can put a little pot. My little honey pot here is a bit big, but I'm just going to do this to show you. You can just put a little pot of honey in the center. And then as people take pieces, they can just take a little bit of the honey up and then drizzle it all down the sides. So this is still warm. I just left it for about 6 minutes before I did the inversion, but because everyone knows I can't not try a little piece. It's quality control. Just gonna take a little piece out of here. It is steaming hot. Oh my gosh, that looks so good. It is very, very hot. I'm just gonna take, all right, it's so hot, I actually am gonna need a little towel here. And I'm just gonna take a little honey, drizzle it on top for extra sweetness. It's so moist. It's just, it's wonderful and so simple to make, as you saw. It's so moist because of the shredding of the apples. It's sweet, unctuous, perfectly autumnal. It is so good. So whether you are celebrating Rosh Hashanah, or you have friends or neighbors, or you have a community that is celebrating, this is the perfect thing to bring. But you don't even have to be celebrating Rosh Hashanah. This is just a perfect autumnal cake to make, and you will not regret the limited time it took to make this. It's great warm, it's great at room temperature, and it's even still good a day or two later because it is so moist. So please make this. I will post the recipe on my website ASAP for you. It'll be at enidgrace.com under the recipes tab, and it will be called the honey apple cake. Shana Tova Umektra, everybody. Happy Rosh Hashanah and a happy Jewish New Year.